Welcome to Tracy's Terrors. If you love horror and appreciate smart animal commentary, then you are in the right place. Today, Strigoi, VamPullet, and I will be discussing Peter Newbrook's 1972 film, The Asphyx. Now, you may have noticed that I sound sick, and I am begging for dirt, but nothing could stop me from talking about this film. I'm going to begin the review by stating the obvious. Peter Newbrook's horror masterpiece, The Asphyx, has the best title ever. Call me juvenile, but when the serious British protagonist solemnly delivers lines like, "I want you to summon up my asphyx," or "It is within my grasp to trap a man's asphyx," I cannot suppress my laughter. Yet while the film invites immature viewers like me to engage in this crude wordplay, it also solicits the consideration of more serious, albeit starkly presented ideas. The Asphyx is an original take on the mad scientist theme that explores in a surprisingly direct way the relationship between reproduction and power. It also issues a warning, comically shrill and over the top as befits the genre, against the dangers of progressive thought, suggesting that if you go too far to the left, you might just end up on the right. The film's concerns with technology and politics are worked out through a series of spectacular death scenes that in their Byzantine mechanics seem straight out of the abominable Dr. Phibes from 1971. And while I don't know if Phibes influenced Newbrook, it's clear that Hammer Productions and the work of Roger Corman did. The Asphyx's technological concerns could have easily taken the form of a steampunk fantasy, but the film's relative fidelity to 19th century achievements and the hardcore dedication to a Hammer-esque Gothicism roots it firmly in the realm of horror, a definite plus for viewers like me who are happier in Dracula's castle than in, say, Captain Nemo's submarine. Just because I love the Asphyx's classic macabre flourishes, its caskets, crypts, and cobwebs, doesn't mean that the movie is a stale rehash of old materials scavenged from Bray Studios. Far from it. With its incongruous music, at times Giallo-esque intensity, and most of all, its singular story and creature concept, the film is very much its own thing. What sets The Asphyx apart from anything that's come before or since is its very quirky plot. It's the late Victorian era, and Sir Hugo Cunningham, a respected country gentleman and amateur scientist, hopes to capture psychical phenomena by taking pictures of the dying. Each of his macabre images reveals a strange dark smudge, and the Psychical Research Society, an august group to which he belongs, claims that these visual artifacts are scientific proof of the soul departing the body. But based on evidence gathered through his most recent inventions, Sir Hugo comes to a different conclusion. With his newly developed motion picture camera and a light booster, he records a public execution and a fatal boating accident involving one of his sons. What he sees is not the soul ascending to heaven, but he theorizes a Greek god of death called the Asphyx, coming to possess the living at the moment of their demise. This Grim Reaper isn't singular, but multiple. Each person has his own, and if you can capture your personal asphyx, then you can live forever. In pursuit of immortality and eternal power, the once revered community leader and beloved patriarch loses his moral compass, alienating his friends and destroying his family. At a basic level, beneath the contours of its unusual storyline, The Asphyx is a new interpretation of a theme that's at least as old as Frankenstein. A hubristic scientist forsakes traditional or natural modes of reproduction for technological ones and is ultimately punished for his arrogance. Yet while the theme is familiar, The Asphyx is unusually explicit in its outline of different forms of biological extension and their correspondence to the exercise of power. The film opens with an almost overabundance of socially sanctioned fecundity, as we learn that all of the characters are engaged to be married. the patriarch Sir Hugo to Anna, his son Clive to Elizabeth, and though it hasn't been approved yet, his daughter Christina to his adopted son Giles. And yes, there's an incestuous vibe there. All of these unions, we are told, will produce children, and in a startlingly frank conversation, Sir Hugo and Clive discuss the connection between offspring and the family's continued influence. According to Sir Hugo, they're living in a time of great social change, and the only way to guarantee the implementation of the family's agenda is through the production of more Cunninghams, who will, he assumes, act in accordance with his interests. But the attractions of bypassing this time-honored way of governing quickly become clear to Sir Hugo. While originating a dynasty would be the conventional way of extending his will into the future, immortality, he realizes, is a more seamless and efficient way of doing it. Eternal life would allow him to direct the course of local affairs forever without interruption from any upstart scion. If the movie begins with a reverence of marriage, by the end, that more traditional, or most rather traditional, institution of perpetuating power has been completely displaced by scientific manipulations. Romantic partners die and experiments gone wrong, ending the 3 engagements with which we began, and as possibilities for natural coupling are closed down, the film delivers its bluntly conservative message. Tinkering with the nuclear family, that hallowed unit of generativity, brings nothing but death and destruction. Messing with the status quo is also morally corrosive, as the radical transformation of Sir Hugo's character makes plain. When we're first introduced to the Cunningham patriarch, he's firmly aligned with progressive causes, a reform-minded philanthropist who has invested heavily in the social safety net. He cares for the poor and advocates for a more humane justice system. But it's his endorsement of liberal ideas with their emphasis on reason, tolerance, and innovation that ultimately provide him with a justification for torturing the terminally ill and killing his own daughter. In Sir Hugo's unambiguous arc, we see how easy it is for a well-meaning liberal to become a murdering fascist. The Asphyx's brand of conservative alarmism is the bread and butter of horror films. It's the slasher's MO. And that in no way detracts from my enjoyment of the genre in general, or from this instantiation in particular. Like all horror, the Asphyx thrives in ideological extremes, and exaggerated to the point of comedy, its morality lessons inevitably subvert themselves. It doesn't hurt that the moralism is wrapped in campy, amazing violence. Tracing Sir Hugo's descent down the slippery slope of progressive thought, the Asphyx brings us a series of death scenes that rival those of Dr. Phibes in their creativity and almost Rube Goldberg complexity. In order to trap their Asphyxes, the characters must bring them out into the open by putting themselves in lethal situations. Now, obviously, a well-aimed gun or a middling dose of poison with an emetic nearby would do the trick, but this is a visual medium, and the dictates of the plot give Newberg the perfect opportunity to go big, and he does. Sir Hugo builds an electric chair for himself and has a guillotine erected for Christina. Giles drops an enormous glass cube over his head with various tubes and tanks so that he can gas himself, though we later discover that his asphyxiation tank is actually an indirect route to simple self-immolation. At every turn, the easy is made difficult, the plain is baroque. The most absurd example of this occurs when Giles, in an attempt to prove to Christine that her father is immortal, leaves Sir Hugo in an airtight container, or casket rather, within the family crypt for 24 hours. Was this elaborate scheme really necessary? No, but it's creepy and visually stunning. The superfluous scene in the family mausoleum brings me to the question of the Asphyx's dominant aesthetic mode. Because Amazon's blurb calls it steampunk, I was expecting alternative histories and fantastical gadgetry powered by copper-colored boilers, but really, it isn't that at all. With the exception of the light booster and its blue aquarium gravel, which is really the only truly sci-fi element in the film, everything else, from the photography to the motion picture camera, even to the electric chair, feels grounded in the actual advancements of the period, which, based on Sir Hugo's membership in a fictionalized Society for Psychical Research, I take to be somewhere around the 1880s or 90s. So You know, the Asphyx is missing the kind of outlandish and purely speculative devices that, to my mind, characterize science fiction. While it has something of that obsession with newfangled equipment that characterizes, post-war atomic horror, at its heart, the Asphyx is a love letter to the Gothicism pioneered in the 1960s by Hammer Productions and, maybe exemplified in Roger Corman's Poe cycle. Its style is deliberately and aggressively macabre, even when a naturalistic approach would make more sense. These over-the-top flourishes tone down the steampunk vibe, which is perfect for a viewer like me who's more into classic horror than, say, retrofuturism. My favorite macabre touch is the casket in which the Asphyx is placed. It's a toe pincher casket, which just seems unnecessary and over the top. But it's just one of the absurdities that qualify this film for cult status. There's also the music, the acting, and the creature design. A cheerful pastoral score plays as Sir Hugo convulses on his electric chair, and it soars as Christina stares at the blade that will excise her head. To say that there's a mismatch between these uplifting strains and the gruesome scenes is an understatement. There's also this incongruous Italian vibe to Sir Hugo's interactions with Giles, which exhibit a level of unpredictable emotional intensity that feels out of place in a conversation between uber-British rationalists. If the patriarch were a woman in a giallo film, he'd be slapped. And then there are the gods of death themselves, the Asphyxes. With their craggy features, dorsal fins, and outstretched arms, these little grim reapers who are only ever seen from the waist up look like Godzilla sock puppets. They are adorable and add significantly to the film's already abundant charm. Have you seen The Asphyx? If you've seen it, drop into the comments and tell me what you thought of it. I really love it. It's one of my favorite films. But yes, share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks so much for joining us today. As usual, if you like the show, please subscribe to the channel. Visit us at the website, tracysterrors.com. Follow us on social media. We will see you next time. Take care.